First, let me say that it is an absolute honor to be before you, to come back and to be part of this celebration. And as I've told other people, it really was formative in my own journey as a professor and an artist to be here. So thank you. All right. I'm going to talk about this first piece, Ears to Hear, Eyes to See. So the context for this piece is that I was invited to be one of 10 sculptors from around the country to come to a place outside of Dallas, Texas, to create a piece on the land, 72-acre nature reserve. And each artist was given free rein as to where to set up and what they wanted to accomplish with their budget. I received a videotape from the people. I wanted to see what the site options were, and began to design the piece in a maquette or scale model form while I was here. Meanwhile, I'm collecting thoughts through my sketchbook, random fragments of things like artists do. And one theme was starting to surface, and that theme had to do with dying to yourself. And so that began the process. Well, one of the conversations that was actually critical to this development of the maquette was with Dan Callis in our closet over in McNally. Actually, excuse me, that was our office. Sorry. If there are any administrators here, sorry. But it was a critical conversation because I had been doing perceptually laden pieces with the assumption that moving through space and working with visual, oral, and kinesthetic perception as vehicles for experiential metaphor was the premise of the piece. And as I moved in content-wise, there was a point where I received a phone call out of the blue from my brother, who was in Alaska working as a dentist, but he was also part of the Air National Guard. And this was 1991. He called me and said, Raj, I'm calling to say goodbye because my unit is being called up and we're heading to Kuwait. And we had been instructed to contact our immediate relatives and just in case we don't come back. Well, that threw me for a loop. Imagine your closest immediate family contacting you and saying, this is it, I may not be coming back. It shook me up, but it also confirmed my thinking for this particular piece. So, actually I'm backing up one. As we moved forward and got to the site, I actually took Scott Sukett, and I don't know if he's here, but a student here from Biola. And we began to work, and we had some help from other people on site. But it became clear to me that I wanted to use a symbol that somehow communicated beyond actual experience. And so that was the conversation with Dan. Because it was crossing a line for me to actually use a visible symbol that would not be an experience, it would be a visual reminder. And that's what was built here, a casket. And so this entire structure rested on this casket, and it was fortified with concrete down below and 4x4 posts, and it held a lot of weight. And as we continued to work on the piece, it was the only visual symbol in the piece, but the other things started to unfold. So just to take you through the piece, the long structure was coming out of the ground. Physically, it was embedded in the ground and then moved forward. The remaining components of the structure all came off of this, which all rested on the casket. And a circular walkway led to a podium-like structure that allowed a vista view of the 72-acre nature reserve, and actually elevated the viewer's eye height to about 14 feet off the ground. These pictures really don't do justice because the ground slopes much more rapidly. This flattens it out. And the sense of, I don't know, fear when you're up that high and vulnerable as you're walking to the site, or to that podium experience, is actually quite a ways up there. The structure also had a round wall. And this round wall, this semicircular wall, by this time had become a piece of vocabulary in my work, doing double duty. One is that if you walk around or the backside of a round wall, you have just repented. Because you start in one direction, and by the time you come around the other side, you have done a 180. And I've used that as a symbolic, physical, kinesthetic reference. But also, it collects sound on the inside of this round wall. And so using sound as a component, I knew that of this grove of trees behind the piece. And when we built the piece, it was about this time of year. And the leaves were just the buds for the leaves were just starting to form and so forth. And I was told by the locals that there would be an absolute party of cardinals that would nest in these trees, and they chirp, chirp, chirp. And by the time I left, they were doing just that. What happened with that was that the sound bounced off this round wall. It actually collected the sound and then bounced to a smaller piece that is that central round component that had a seat in it. And so it likewise edited sound coming off the other one, and it was located at the focal point of the larger round wall. So I'm using sound to collect and refer to nature. And here you see another view of that round wall. But the other thing is that I'm also offering a vista view. Now, another component that is not so visible in these images is that there's a gap between the circular ramp that leads to this platform where the round wall and the smaller round wall it was. And this gap meant that there was risk. You had to cross over, and you had to deliberately take a step across into this zone. And so this shows other views of the same piece. So I'm collecting sound and then offering a vista view of the site. Well, during this time, by the time I was near completion, one of the other artists, about 100 yards away from me, came over one day and said, "So tell me about what this is, what are you up to?" And I showed him the maquette, I told him the title of the piece, and then I said, "Well, it's really about kind of dying to yourself." And he said, "Oh, I get it. I mean, I understand." And then he told me this story. He said that he was a kayaker, and he liked white river rafting and rapids, using the kayak in rapids. And that fall, he had gone out by himself and got on some rapids, and he was experienced. He had training and he had the right equipment and so forth. As he went down, he flipped. The rapids flipped him, and he was upside down in the water. And of course, as a kayaker, you learn how to use your paddle to right yourself. Well, he started to do that, and he hit a rock and snapped it, and it was gone. And then you also learn ways to position your torso to right the kayak as you're going downstream. Now, meanwhile, he's going downstream very quickly. And bouncing off rocks and so forth. And then he had this realization that, shoot, this is dangerous. And he said that he was starting to panic. And he struggled and tried several times, and nothing was happening. And he realized he might die. And then just one final effort, he twisted his torso and was able to reach his hand out hoping for anything, and there was a branch there. And he held on for dear life. He lost his kayak, he lost everything, but he was able to get out of the water. And he pulled himself onto the side, turned himself over, and he just went and gasped to get air because he was so out. And he said in that 30 seconds, because of the blood rushing to his brain, he saw color that he had never seen before. Everything became crystal clear. Another thing is that his ears shut down, except he could hear birds chirping in the midst of all this rough sound of water. And he said he saw everything differently. And also, he realized what was really important in his life in that 30 seconds. Well, after telling that story, he looked at me, and then he looked at the piece, and he simply said, "Yes," and walked away.